We must talk about Iran. There is a lot going on in the world beyond Donald Trump right now, and I understand there's so much happening also in the space of Donald Trump, and in fact, the Iran story is related to that, but I do have to tell you, I have a sneaking suspicion that people are going to get burned out just when everything is about Trump, because there's so much more than Trump. Even during the campaign, I found that people were getting just exhausted. Even when Trump was doing great stuff, people, including Trump supporters, after a while are like, there's clearly got to be other stuff out there. But we are still in the FAFO mode of Donald Trump right now. We got the Colombian situation. We've got now the Iran situation that is not getting a lot of coverage. And so I'm also finding one of the trade-offs with Donald Trump coverage is there's so much that happens so quickly. Part of my job has got to be to digest everything for you, and the stuff that's not getting as much attention because we've already moved on to the next thing, go back to it, spend some time on it, and put it on your radar. Because there's a lot, and it can get overwhelming. As I said in the first hour, there's still 1,454 days left of Donald Trump, and some of these people on the left are losing their minds. Some people on the right who hate Donald Trump are losing their minds. I just as an aside, I'm trying to be polite here. I really am, and I'm starting to lose my patience with even some friends of mine. Let me just put it this way. If you're finding yourself constantly upset about Donald Trump, maybe go outside and walk around. Maybe go touch some grass. The first week of Trump's administration was actually really good from a conservative perspective, not from a MAGA perspective, not even from a Republican perspective, but as a conservative who questions Trump, there was a lot of good his first week. And I think if you're someone who considers yourself right of center, but you don't like Trump and you can't bring yourself to say a lot of good stuff happened the first week, there's something wrong with you, not him. There's something wrong with you intellectually, fundamentally. He's broken you in some way. There's something off psychologically about you right now. If you can go through the last week and look at everything that happened and think it's all terrible and you consider yourself right of center, something fundamentally is wrong with you. I get lit on fire all the time by MAGA for not being MAGA. In fact, anytime I say something nice about Donald Trump, someone shows up, well, you're just saying that because you're afraid you'll lose your audience. I have lost the fear of losing my audience after 2016. I'm regularly insulting to some of the people who listen to this program. I know it. They email me. They're still listening. They're still hate listening. Even what's his name out in Trenton, Tulsa still listens. Y'all, one of the other good things that has happened in the last week is with Iran. Iran is a danger to this country. What makes Iran more dangerous than a lot of other countries is that Iran doesn't have the capacity to confront us directly, but Iran has built up proxies around the world, some of whom I believe are in this country illegally, having crossed the southern border. And they've been waiting for us. Jim Garrity has this story. Let me just read you from Garrity over at National Review. We have lost deterrence in multiple theaters around the world, Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned in his confirmation hearing. Deterrence came back fast, at least in some corners of the world. Last week, this newsletter reported on the Houthi announcing they're no longer intended to target U.S. or U.K. ships. This weekend, a stunning report in the Daily Telegraph indicated that the Iranian mullahs suddenly want to avoid any move that the United States could perceive as provocative. Now, let me read you this. This is from the Telegraph in London, one of the few newspapers I have a subscription to. Iran has ordered its proxy forces across the Middle East to exercise caution as the Islamic Republic fears an existential threat following Donald Trump's return to the White House, the Telegraph has learned. Officials have told commanders of Iran-backed militias to avoid provocative actions that could escalate regional tensions. Commanders have also been instructed to maintain defensive positions while avoiding any action that could be interpreted as aggressive by U.S. forces or regional allies. Forces and allies in the region have been instructed to act with caution as the regime feels an existential threat with Trump's return, one senior Iranian official told the Telegraph from Tehran. In Iraq and Yemen, forces have been told not to target any American assets, and if they do, they are explicitly warned against using Iranian weapons, the official added. They have been told to keep defensive positions for a while and to avoid any action that might provoke the Americans. Notice that was in the London Telegraph. It wasn't in the New York Times. It wasn't in the Washington Post or USA Today. It was London. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, this again to the Telegraph, Iran's 85-year-old supreme leader, even appeared to be wearing a flak jacket at the funeral of two judges who were gunned down in Tehran last weekend, reportedly over fear of attacks. With his robes bulging at unusual angles, Khamenei was pictured this week standing over the coffins of the men said to have been assassinated inside the Supreme Court by an infiltrator. The fall of Assad has intensified fears in the regime, the official said. There are now fears they may not be able to hold on to the country after witnessing what happened to Assad, which no one had expected. A large-scale operation is underway to identify and arrest Israeli spies and infiltrators, and there are concerns that they may have infiltrated high-ranking offices. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is about, a gunman assassinated two Supreme Court judges in Iran. These Iranian judges were hardliners who had handed out death penalty sentences for just absurd things. Things that shouldn't have gotten people the death penalty. These Iranian Supreme Court judges had handed out death penalties. So a gunman assassinated both of them, walked into the Supreme Court, was able to get past security in the Iranian Supreme Court and killed them. He was caught and hanged. And if you saw the picture of the man being hanged for assassinating the two judges, you would have never known he was about to be hanged because he was smiling at the camera and giving thumbs up. He was happy to die. The Iranian regime is crumbling. It got a lifeline from Joe Biden, and that lifeline is gone now. The world is changing in response to Trump coming back. The Houthi have stopped attacking ships. In fact, shipping through the Suez Canal is going back to normal because the Houthi that had been operating as a class of pirates and terrorists launching missiles at ships, including at U.S. Carriers, U.S. destroyers, and other naval vessels, they've decided to stop now. Why do you think that is? See, and this is something that it frustrates me. It frustrates me deeply in how people just can't be honest. I mentioned at the beginning of the segment my friends who are on the right who are just in nonstop perpetual outrage about Trump. They can't give him credit for anything. They're behaving just like people on the left who hate Donald Trump. I'm not sure if you're paying attention, but in the last week, the Houthi have stopped firing on U.S. ships and stopped firing on vessels carrying cargo to Europe. In just the last week, 2 weeks ago when Joe Biden was president, they were still attacking ships in the Red Sea. Suddenly, last week, they've stopped. Literally the only dynamic that has changed is who is president of the United States. The Iranians are now telling their proxies, do not do anything that could get the Americans convinced that you're hostile. Don't do anything. The Iranians 2 weeks ago didn't care. The only dynamic that's changed is Donald Trump. This is not to say he's perfect. This is not to say he won't make mistakes. This is not to say he won't do things that you or I disagree with him on. I disagree with Robert Kennedy as a nominee. I disagree with Tulsi Gabbard as a nominee. I'm perfectly happy to speak up when I disagree with him. I think tariffs as a general policy are a bad idea. I'm willing to speak up and say those things. But if you can't also say, hey, this is pretty good, suddenly the Middle East is safe. Suddenly the violence in the Middle East has calmed down. It is absolutely, even the Biden administration was willing to admit it, Donald Trump's role that got Netanyahu to agree to peace terms with Hamas. As much as Joe Biden wanted to take credit for it, you had even his national security aides were saying, couldn't have gotten there except Donald Trump's election. He put pressure on him that we couldn't do. And you can't say good. Part of this is something else that also the media doesn't want to acknowledge, the Democrats don't want to acknowledge. Just how bad Joe Biden was at the job. Joe Biden was terrible at the job of the presidency. Absolutely terrible. We had chaos in the Middle East. We had war in the Middle East. We had American naval vessels being fired upon by the Houthi, who Joe Biden had taken off the terror watch list. Donald Trump promptly put him back on it day one in office. And guess what? He put the Houthi back on the terror list day one in office. Now the Houthi are saying, hey, Donald Trump, we're not going to fire any missiles anymore in the Red Sea. We promise we're going to stay away. It's wild to me. You have a bunch of people who for 4 years demanded we acknowledge good things from the Biden administration who cannot bring themselves to acknowledge that in a single week, really 6 days in office, we're only now on the 7th day of Trump's tenure in office. And they, it's bad, terrible first week, awful first week. Yeah, getting Iran to tell its proxies don't attack anybody, yeah, okay. Getting the Houthis to stand down, yeah, okay. Getting the Colombians to admit illegal aliens back in the country, Mexico, other countries, that's a pretty good week in office. Getting rid of DEI, rooting out the people trying to obstruct it, that's a pretty good week in office. Your inability to acknowledge the good things is a signal of your brokenness and your partisanship and your bitterness and your butthurt over losing an election. People need to grow up, and Iran delenda est.